Welcome to Sales Mastery. I'm your host, Anna Scheller, and I absolutely love being able to help you grow your business through learning more about sales and building sales confidence. You can learn more about me by going to annascheller.com. That's Anna with two N's, Scheller, Scheller. There you can learn about me. There's some free downloads. There's other podcasts. There's a lot of resources to help you, especially during this time of great challenge, to learn how to interact with your clients so that you can make more money, recover from any economic downturns that you may have experienced, and become prosperous and thrive in a new economy. So go to annascheller.com and check me out there. Now, today's guest is Dana Pharant. Dana is known as, she has a brand called the Inner Dominatrix. She built a 7-figure business without sales calls. And as a former dominatrix, yes, you heard me right, she is a former dominatrix. She knows all about owning her power and being unique. She's worked with clients for over 25 years, helping them step into the energy of that inner dominatrix. Now, the inner dominatrix may not be what you're thinking. It's all about authentic confidence, willing to be judged, and rolling with anything that life dishes out. She's written 5 books, won multiple awards, and treats her own personal development like an extreme sport. During this particular episode of Sales Mastery, we're going to be talking with Dana all about tapping into your intuition, that part, that gut feeling that oftentimes you wish you'd listened to. Well, you're going to learn more about that in this episode. Join me in welcoming Dana Pharant. Hey, Dana, it is so nice to have you on Sales Mastery all the way from Ontario, Canada. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for hosting me, Anna. This is lovely.
Now, we have to let people know how I got to meet you. I love that you're a badass coach, badass business coach.
Performance coach, yeah.
And you have an interesting title for a book. So your brand is Inner Dominatrix. And that's kind of a fun story right there. So maybe give our listeners just a quick story about how you embraced that brand. Now I can tell how I got to meet you.
Okay, so first off, the question that a lot of people have is, was I actually a dominatrix? And yes. So real live, whips and chains, leather corset kind of thing. And at this point, what I'm doing is I'm really looking at how that as an archetype, who I had to become to fill that role. I see that as such a vital piece for anybody in business. And if they want to actually be a leader and do it in a way that they feel empowered and authentic and themselves, then all of the things that I learned in that world are so applicable. So I bring the inner dominatrix in as an archetype. And I do find that it's interesting. So I was, of course, a speaker at the Grow 2020 retreat with Stephanie Scheller, and you were emceeing it. And, of course, my name was in the hat as possible speakers. And, then you want to tell what happened on your end?
So when Stephanie last year, when she was looking at speakers, she said, Mom, I am Stephanie's mother, by the way. She said, Mom, I've got this speaker. I like her message, but she's a dominatrix, or she's got this inner dominatrix brand. What do you think? And I'm like, well, and she's concerned because this is a San Antonio event, and you were a little concerned about maybe having some stereotypes that would put people off, not make people comfortable coming to the event. So we had some discussion about it, and I said, Stephanie, we just don't make a big deal of the dominatrix thing. It's, we have a very male-based audience and, very conservative Hispanic Catholic culture. I said, so we just won't play it up. Can she do the marketing without it? So she's like, oh, okay. She texts my other daughter, Susanna, who does our video and audio, and Susanna shoots back a text. I find all this out later, by the way, that, oh yeah, if mom thinks it's okay, yeah, we shouldn't have any problems. So then I was at Stephanie's house for Thanksgiving, saw your book where she was reading it. And so I picked it up and I'm like thinking, oh, wow, this is interesting. Now I hadn't read any of the juicy stuff. I was just looking toward the end of the book where there's more practical type tips and stuff. So I'm like, Stephanie, I'd really like to get this book. And I said, oh, can I borrow your book? And she said, oh, no, that's very personal, Mom. I go, oh, okay. So I contacted you. I get a copy of the book. You send me an autographed copy. And I start reading it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what a dominatrix was. And so I texted Stephanie and I go, Stephanie, did you know what a dominatrix was? And she goes, you didn't? So, but you know what I find just wonderful is that through a lack of understanding, we have become good friends. Mm-hmm. And I treasure the friendship that we have. And also, it goes to show that you want to be really careful about labeling people. If I had made a judgment about you based on what a dominatrix was, chances are we would have never met. And so for that, we just have to understand how God brings people together to create and forge relationships that ultimately work for both parties. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. And Stephanie.
Well, and I just want to clear up for people listening that you thought a dominatrix was just a feminist, like a strong feminist.
Yes, I did. I thought that it was just a brassy woman. And I remember when we first met you, I was like, wow, she's really very soft-spoken. She carries her power well, but she's not overpowering. And I thought, oh yeah, this is going to work just fine. And then, so I just laughed, but who you are is very much what you embody in that book. And one of the things that you talk about in the Become a Badass in Business book, and is also in the book that I'm actually, while you're on the show today, called Badass Intuition. And that is the whole idea of intuition. A lot of people feel that decisions in business have to be made rationally. You have your T, right? You have the decision up here. You have the pros and the cons. And if the pros outweigh the cons, then you've made a good decision. But that's not always the case, is it?
Yeah, and especially right now. So right now, of course, we've got the pandemic happening and our decisions need to be made probably faster than they have before. We have to pivot. We have to change course direction, change our marketing messaging, change all of these things very quickly. And so we actually don't have the luxury of going through pros and cons and having the grids and all of those decision matrices that we would have had before. And yet, when we tune into our intuition, the reality is that our intuition is never wrong, never wrong. So if you had an advisor on board your team, on board your company, and this person was never wrong, would you run everything past that person? Of course you would.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm inviting people to start doing, is to start to be able to tune into the intuition and trusting the messages that we're getting so that you can move forward with it. Because when you start to tap into the intuition, whether you believe, whether your messaging or your language is like God, universe, source, whatever, it allows you to tap into that bigger, beyond you collective awareness. And that's where that inspiration comes in for you to follow the direction of what is in the bigger game play. So not necessarily in the immediate. And that's the beauty of the intuition, is that it's enabling you to tap into what is the long game and how do you get that. So that's, for me, one of the cornerstones of what I love teaching people for business, because it's fast, it's immediate, and it's always accurate.
but it's also, let's be honest, it can be a little scary. I mean, because it can almost feel like blind faith. And in your book, you talk about, we're going to get to coffee with your business a little later, so don't want to spoil anything there, but you talk about a moment or a time in your business when you decided that things had to be different. Can you share about that?
So this is back when I had my other business. So I used to have a 7-figure supply outlet. It was a spa supply. And 2012, we just, hit that piece where it was like everything that could go wrong did go wrong in a 3-month period. We were already on the edge of, trying to keep things together and turn it around. We had a good game plan, but, it was just one thing after another, all these big catastrophes. And so we had to do a bankruptcy and I laid everybody off, went down to just me. I, went against my lawyer's advice and I actually restructured the business. And all through that period, I was simply following my intuition. So, put it in perspective, I had been using all of the tools that I teach for, at least a decade, if not 2 decades, most of them. And so this bankruptcy was a time for me to put all of it to the test, to really lean into my intuition, to, doing the expanding out, not making myself wrong, all the things I talk about. And I think, for a lot of people, a bankruptcy is kind of like the big one in business, right? It's the big fear. And, even right now, what's going on, it's like, am I going to survive? Am I going to have this? So to have tools that allow you to go through that where you stay calm, then the more calm you are, the more at ease you are, the easier it is to access your creative cognitive functions, because the brain power opens up. And if you allow the brain power to open up, you're also opening up the connection to hearing the intuitive voices, hearing those intuitive nudges. What do I do next?
And there's a tool. Well, so your program, you line out a 6-week program for people to follow. And before we started this, we decided that we're going to talk about just the first step right now, because I've been working on it, and I guess I really don't trust myself yet. But and I'm a client of Dana's, so she totally gets right.
We're working on this.
Yeah, we are working. This I am a work in progress, and I'm sure everybody listening, we all are. And I think that's one of the things I love a lot about you, Dana, is you are so transparent and you're so authentic. You're so real. And I love that about you tremendously. I really, really do. And I know we sent, you guys, if you saw our texts to each other, we're kind of like, oh, I miss talking to you. Oh, that's so sweet. So you can build those kind of relationships, and we have a lot of fun. But explain this technique, because I'm going to do a terrible job, and then we're going to watch me. We're going to watch me try it.
So the beginning part of training yourself to tune into your intuition is we can use things that we call muscle testing. And muscle testing or pendulum work, or, there's lots of tools we can use to get that feedback. One of the simplest ways is to take, if you take your non-index finger, so either second finger or ring finger, make a loop with the one hand, and then do the same finger on the other side, and you're just going to create a little link here. Okay, so this thumb is what you're pulling against, and these 2 fingers, I use my non-dominant hand to pull against, because it's easier for me to be consistent. Okay. Oh. Actually, that's my dominant hand. I lied. I just realized, I'm like, I say these things and then no. So, but it's see, this is it. It's like, I think I'm doing something, but I think I'm watching myself in the mirror. I think that's what's going on here. That's hilarious. Okay. Not important about which hand pulls, which hand stays stationary. But the thing that to keep in mind is that when you're holding your finger and thumb together, that you're pulling against, is that you are maintaining about the amount of pressure that it takes to hold a piece of paper. So if you were to hold a piece of paper between your thumb and your finger and to not let it drop on the floor, that's all the pressure you're looking to hold.
Okay.
Okay. Which is also why we go either ring or second finger, because here, these two tend to be stronger and we tend to apply more pressure. Okay. So it's actually easier to maintain a consistent pressure with these two. So coming back to here, so we're going to maintain our link with this hand, and we're going to be pulling against with the one hand. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to have the intention that holding strong, so it's staying strong, is yes, and opening is no. All right.
Okay.
And this allows us to ask yes or no questions. Now, this is not yes or no, can I win the lottery? What are the winning lottery numbers? I'm sorry, it does not work for divination. Do not ask those questions. You know, and if you pick up the book, it's got really good step-by-step, like incrementally building the muscle to get you doing this. But basically with the muscle testing, all I want you to do at the first stage is just getting the feel of yes and no, 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 yes, 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 no, no, no. All you're doing is getting the feel, okay? Getting the feel of the connection of like, that's what yes shows up, that's what no shows up like. The next level with that, and I'll give people the two levels to begin with, is to go around your house and to look at something. So you look at a chair and you go, that's a chair, right? And it holds firm, that's a chair, okay. If you look at the chair and you go, that's a cat, oops, wait myself in the face, then it should break. Okay. And so we start to build up that muscle again of like, okay, those are very obvious things. And this is the thing, is that we build up that muscle to being able to rely on the yes and no answers that we're getting. Then when you start to ask questions of, you know, hey, what shirt do I want to wear? What direction do I want to take to work? What do I want a coffee, or do I want a tea, or do I want this tea or that tea? When you start to ask those questions and follow it, again, you're building that muscle. You're building that muscle. Once you've had some time where you're building the muscle, now we can start to ask questions of our business. And we start to expand on that, and we start to follow it. And so this whole process walks you through the building of your intuition muscle. And then eventually we can get to the coffee with business, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I want to just touch on the piece where you said about that you don't trust yourself. And this is the number one block of people not doing this work. And most of the time that comes from earlier trauma. And so when we have, and I know people don't like to talk about trauma, but when we have, you know, things that have happened in our childhood, whether it is physical abuse or sexual abuse or spiritual abuse or any of the things, when we have that disruption of trust at an early age, then it sets up that imprint of, I can't trust. I can't trust me because I didn't keep me safe. I can't trust somebody else because they didn't keep me safe. And so even if you've done some work, there may be that underlying piece that comes up where you're like, not sure I can trust. And so what'll happen is that you'll get wonky answers.
Okay.
Okay. So we actually need to kind of circle back, deal with the earlier pieces, as well as, you know, building up a muscle of trusting you. So some of the tools that I've taught, of course, at the Grow 2020 retreat, to actually clear out the pieces of being, you know, that it's safe, getting it safe to trust you again. That's really critical. But I want people to know this is not like a lifetime thing. We don't have to like spend years clearing out your stuff in order to get you to trust you. A couple of sessions will really get you fired in and leaning into your intuition. Or you can just keep going with working on it on your own. So.
Well, and as a client of Dana's and also a friend of Dana's, I have to tell you that the things that she teaches work. So the whole idea of being safe, we're in the middle of some very big financial transactions right now. And I would just have to stop and tell myself that it was safe. It was safe. It was safe to make those decisions. It was safe to talk to people who might not agree with me about those decisions. And those weren't easy things to work through. But I can tell you that Dana knows her stuff. And she's, I just, that's one of the reasons why I turned to Dana when it came to thinking about intuition. How do we learn to trust ourselves to lead us? And I do totally believe that when you're quiet, you can receive answers that are not necessarily inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can tell you, for me, it happens in prayer. And when I'm in prayer, and I can tell you story after story after story of when I got a peace in prayer and I knew a direction to follow and followed it. It was powerful. And it was almost like I couldn't even really take credit for it. Can I be
Mm-hmm.
honest? I almost felt like I couldn't take credit for it. And I just felt like it was the Spirit just leading me, directing me, because I I didn't have to have all of the answers. I think that's really key into intuition.
Absolutely.
We don't
Absolutely.
have to have all the answers to be able to step out and listen to intuition.
Yeah. And it's great. It's like, it doesn't matter what language we use. I call it coffee with your business because I'm, having grown up in a religious cult, I'm not a big one for using the word God, but I also respect where other people are at. And so whether you're coming at it from prayer or meditation or just getting quiet and letting yourself intuitively write, they're all the same thing as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned. It
Mhm.
is all a way to get connected to that inspiration, that
Yeah.
wisdom beyond who we are. And
Yeah.
those are the things that when we drop in and we're really quiet and we get that inspiration. And I love the fact that you said, and follow it, okay? Because honestly, that is the key. We all get these nudges all of the time. And we can all think about times where we got the nudge and we didn't listen. And then we're like, oh,
Oh,
shoot, it was right. So learning, programming ourselves to actually follow that nudge, to lean in and to trust and to go for it. And that's what I've put together, the badass intuition, as a 6-week boot camp, to take yourself through that process, to actually develop the muscle to lean in to being able to trust. And that's what builds up to the coffee with your business, which is that quiet time to sit. And I do it through writing, where you sit and you just, it's like, what do you need from me? What do you need more of? What do you need less of? And then just sit and be quiet and let that inspiration come through. So there's lots of ways to get there, but the wisdom that can drop in when you open up is incredible.
and I love how you call it wisdom. It's not necessarily knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's and there's a peace that comes with it. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that makes sense. In
Yeah.
that moment, it totally makes sense. But it can also be very frightening because we don't have necessarily the plan step by step. We don't necessarily have we don't have the strategy all laid out, but we start to take those steps, and it's like every step illuminates the
The
next
next
step,
one.
which
Yeah.
illuminates the next step. And I love that about our intuition. And I think intuition, and I know you'll agree with me on this, it's so critical to business success. It's so critical to business success. And people feel funny about saying, well, I followed my gut. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I'm sure you've run into that millions of times.
I love doing, I do a very non-scientific study, but I love observing people who are successful, and I listen to what they're saying. And I find that over and over again, the people who are, achieving incredible things, it is because they had that spark of inspiration, or that moment, or they had the voice come down, they had a prayer to God, or they had a coffee with their business, or whatever the tool was. That's not the point. They all had this inspiration and they all took action on it without knowing all of the steps. That is consistent. When you listen to people's stories,
Mm.
you really listen below the surface, right? because some of them will try to make it about, well, I took this step and this step and you just need to follow this formula. But when you actually listen, they're not following a formula. They have followed their intuition and then turned that into a formula. Some of them, I think, have, contorted that into that means a formula for everybody, but really it was meant to be their formula. But I find that so many of the wildly successful people are following their intuition.
And it's not coming in a vacuum. They've educated themselves. They have trained themselves to listen to the intuitive side. And it is not something that is going to scream at you. It's something you have to get quiet for, which actually in this pandemic, we were talking about how really important it is that, the world seems to have stopped. Yes, the actual globe is still turning, but the world seems to have stopped. And it's a good thing, in spite of the fact that a crisis has forced it upon us. But it's a really good thing. And so how can people, well, first of all, I highly recommend any session you can have with Dana. She's very gentle, she's very kind, and she'll take you through steps to help you clear out those things that are hindering you. But also let's talk about how they can get in touch with you and how they can get a copy of the book.
Absolutely. So copy the book if you head over to innerdominatrix.com, and you can download a copy of the Badass Intuition on me. So it's a gift. And if you want to reach out for sessions, if you go to bookdana.in, so book Dana, and Dana is spelled DANA.in, book Dana in, and that'll get you started.
Awesome sauce. Well, Dana, thank you so much. I always enjoy the times that we spend together. And thank you for joining us all the way from Ontario, Canada.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Anna.